planet is accelerating fast. Can you imagine only 100 years ago, the total human population was 1.7 billion. Now it's 6 billion and growing. By the end of my lifetime, it could be as much as 11 billion. Think of that. Almost twice the present population in my lifetime. Talk about competition. And something even more interesting. We have now passed the point of no return. Most people now live in a city, if you counted every person across the globe, and it's taken all of human history to get here. But what does this really mean for all of us on this tiny planet?
Well, it means that people are becoming like caged rats, totally dependent on the state to provide water, food, fuel, and every other necessity, even clean air. The trouble is, what happens when these commodities we take for granted suddenly cease to flow our way? Well, it means a lot of tension, wars, and poverty.
Today, we're going to begin an intriguing journey back in time to show you some of the astounding prophecies of the ancient scriptures.
We'll show you how some of these prophecies have already been fulfilled in intricate detail, and how some are being fulfilled today right before our eyes. You'll see how these ancient prophecies predicted the current state of terror and destruction in the world.
And more importantly, how they relate to you and your survival.
So stay tuned as we begin this epic adventure.
Arriving in Pompeii, you'll find it's a very quiet city. But this has not always been true. Historians described it as a profligate city, where nothing was barred, a city of extremes. 20,000 people once lived in this thriving place, not far from Mount Vesuvius, a live volcano. When warnings came from the mountain, many people fled, but thousands stayed to test providence. They failed to acknowledge the signs of imminent destruction and died suddenly. The city of Pompeii was covered with ash, which made it easy to excavate. It's now like a fascinating museum, telling the last events of Pompeii's history like a movie set that has been frozen. The election was in progress. The politicians were as helpless as anyone else. Once horses and chariots jostled for positions in the streets, and the people enjoyed life to the full. Herculaneum is also a clear testimony to warnings unheeded. Some of the people thought they would be safe down by the beach, but they were entombed, clinging together, 150 of them in their last embrace. The scene is hard to imagine. At that time you could buy anything, and it appeared that everything would continue as it always had. You could always buy food, perfumes, leather goods, jewellery, but their whole existence was about to change. These people in this region lived in luxury, with huge courtyards, beautiful artwork. It was a sophisticated centre, although very corrupt. Gladiators fought for entertainment, they fought to kill. Pleasure had become their god. The cloud that billowed up from Mount Vesuvius was 26 kilometres high and mushroomed across the countryside. People watched it, unsure where it would settle. Insidiously, the ash and poisonous gas settled over the city, asphyxiating them. People had resisted the warnings, and their decision was final. They had no chance of escape. Some even perished while having a party for their dead relatives at the cemetery. Can you imagine what it was for a mountain to simply explode into the heavens and spread deadly poison over the province? A dog tried desperately to escape. It obviously died in agony. The big problem for Pompeii and Herculaneum was simple. They didn't listen to the warnings.
I want you to imagine something quite strange. Imagine you could compress the history of our world into the lifespan of one person. so that the whole history of the world would be viewed a little short of 100 years. So life on earth begins. Everything is joyous. There is so much beauty. For baby Earth's first few years, everything remains the same. As the infant Earth develops, life doesn't speed up at all. You travel about the same speed you always have, about as fast as a horse. Still, in a rural setting, you eat from the soil you have tilled. Occasionally a war breaks out on the borders, but changes take place at snail pace. You still draw your water from the river or the village well and carry it on your back or on your head. Now the earth has become a child. But the way people live doesn't really alter. We still eat the same kind of foods that people have always eaten. And of course, we grow the food for ourselves. Now the world is a teenager. Has it changed? No, not a great deal. Almost all on earth live in the country. They carry their supplies on horseback or bullock cart, or on their own backs. Middle age has arrived. Surely we can expect changes now. No, not many. Then old age strikes. You start to deteriorate. Your face is wrinkled, your eyesight is finished, and you don't have the same agility you once had. What is happening to the world now? Suddenly, when the year 99 strikes for the world, everything goes crazy. And it all happens in the last year of the world. You see, if compared to one lifetime, things have changed for the earth almost overnight. For the first time in human existence, the majority of people live in the city. If everything had happened in one lifetime, in the last few days, we would have discovered the science to clone ourselves. We have sent men to the moon, and we now travel faster than the speed of sound. Our fathers saw the invention of the aeroplane. With all this science, there is still something terribly wrong. We have never conquered greed and selfishness. We are the same as the ancients. We can't stop war. We can't stop hate. Well, what does the future hold anyway? Can we boast of a glorious future? Look at these nations. What are they saying? Standing together, holding forth on something important, is China, Spain, England, the United States, Japan, Germany, and others. They're bonded in one beautiful song of unity, singing the praises of universal peace. They're celebrating with candles. They are so kind to one another. They are riding through space on an atomic bomb. They are ready to move at any moment. China has a dagger tucked in his trousers. Russia is ready. The United States, the greatest arms merchant in the world, sells the arms and then wonders why nations use them. There is no peace, I can assure you.
Eli Wiesel, a great thinker of our modern world, once stated, "If one word can characterise the 20th century, that word would be hatred." If this is so, what would characterise the 21st century? What an indictment on the human race! After so many thousands of years of civilization, you think we could live together on this planet after so much destruction and sadness. But no, it gets worse. What is there about Jerusalem that helps us to understand something about the future? I promise to show you some amazing prophecies. Your head will spin at the accuracy of these. So come with me to Jerusalem. You would love this place. Herod the Great built Jerusalem to rival the magnificence of Rome itself. Did you know that Jesus made an amazing prediction about Jerusalem that happened exactly as he said it would? Sitting on the Mount of Olives with the disciples, gazing over the city, Jesus made some astounding prophecies that few people have ever heard. When you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you'll know that its desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those who are in the city get out, and let those in the country not enter the city. For this is the time of punishment in fulfillment of all that has been written. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. There will be great distress in the land and wrath against his people. They will fall by the sword and will be taken as prisoners into all the nations. Now, just how could you leave a city when it's under siege? And just how did he know the future so well? He could never have guessed what was to happen to this seemingly invincible city. Jesus knew something that the Christians later came to understand. You see, his words were very precise as he described the future events that would take place at Jerusalem, because the God of the universe himself had revealed it. Sure, you say it's written in the Bible, but is the Bible an accurate record of history? After all, many believe the Bible is just a bunch of well-written fairy tales. On the other hand, if this prediction is true, then we can be sure that Jesus did know the future. To be sure that the prophecy is reliable, there would need to be evidence from another source, backing up the Bible, and therefore showing it to be true and reliable. Well, here's the amazing story from history. Let's step back in time for just a moment to see what happened. On one occasion, Jesus had been standing in the temple area and categorically stated that the temple would be completely destroyed. In fact, there would not be a single stone left on top of another. It would all perish.
This is how the Bible tells the story. As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it and said, "If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace. But now it is hidden from your eyes. The days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment against you and encircle you and hem you in on every side. They will dash you to the ground, you and the children within your walls. They will not leave one stone on another, because you did not recognize the time of God's coming to you." What did he know? It had taken 46 years to build. Was it going to be destroyed so easily? This deeply troubled his friends, and while looking over Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives, they asked him what he was trying to tell them. Jesus said, "When you hear of wars and revolutions, do not be frightened. These things must happen first, but the end will not come right away. They will fall by the sword and will be taken as prisoners to all the nations." This is exactly the persecution, the famines, everything, just as Jesus said.
You will remember the most famous trial in all of history. Jesus was tried by Pilate and condemned to death. Jesus was carrying that cross and stumbling under the heavy wooden beams. And he stated something that could only be known by someone able to see the future. As he looked into the faces of the women, he saw the women of Jerusalem weeping for him, and he said something strange.
Jesus said, "Don't weep for me, but weep for yourselves and your children." Now those who had heard him speak on the Mount of Olives remembered. He said there would never be peace. The Romans believed that they could bring peace to the world. But Jesus said, "No, you will see soldiers surrounding the city, and you will know it is close to the end." When Jesus said these things, Jerusalem was a very prosperous place, and it certainly felt like nothing would change for centuries. It was full of life, and people had plenty. There was food for many years ahead. How could famine strike here? Jesus warned the Christians to get out as soon as they saw the sign. The sign was Romans surrounding the city. You certainly could not mistake that kind of event. It wasn't something that happened every day. When Cestius Gallus and his soldiers made plans to capture Jerusalem, he had no idea that his actions were the sign for very bad times ahead. Jesus made it very clear that it would be better not to be born than to be caught in the city. The Christians had to flee, and they did. They went to a place called Pella in Jordan. There they found refuge, a place that later became a centre of Christianity. Sydney University has excavated the site and confirmed that it became a centre of Christianity. The teams excavated 13 Christian churches right here at Pella in the Jordan Valley. Cestius Gallus failed, but Rome could not tolerate failure. Rome knew they had a brilliant general who was serving elsewhere in the empire. His name was Vespasian. He had been successful in Gaul, now modern France, and Rome ordered him to subdue the rebellious Jews in Palestine. He was more subtle than Cestius Gallus, and instead of going to the capital city, Jerusalem, he decided to conquer the country piece by piece. He started in the remote north and successfully conquered Galilee. As the country was slowly subdued, everyone flocked to the city of Jerusalem. Jesus had warned his followers not to go to Jerusalem. It would not be a place of refuge, but a place of horror. But those who did not listen obviously felt that Jerusalem was the safest place, and so they headed into the city. It was the time of the Jewish feasts, and as far as we know, there were over 1 million people packed into the city. The soldiers under Vespasian camped on Mount Scopus, which looks over the Temple Mount. They gave plenty of opportunity for the people to escape. Josephus, a Jew who wrote the history of these events, claimed the Romans even tried to prompt the people to escape. But they felt secure. They had identity. They were nationalistic, and they stayed. Who could know the city would divide into factions, each one preying on the other, destroying the food supply of Jerusalem? The enemies came from among their own people, and these false leaders led people to destroy their own future by eliminating desperately needed supplies. This is exactly what Jesus had predicted. When the Romans finally conquered the city, the soldiers were shocked. The people on the streets were hardly able to stagger because of the hunger. As Josephus describes it, famine tightens its nasty grip as Titus, the son of Vespasian, turns to the upper city. The upper rooms are full of women and children dying by famine. Vespasian, now emperor of Rome, had given the responsibility of conquering Jerusalem to his son Titus. When they were finally inside the city, the soldiers slit open the bellies of the people, knowing full well they had swallowed their wealth. Josephus describes it as a complete horror. He tells of a certain Mary, a wealthy, eminent woman from Bethsabab, who came to Jerusalem for refuge. As she came to the city, she thought of the war, of the future, and of her newborn child. She looked at her child, slit its throat, and said, "Come, be thou my food." And she ate her own child. It is no wonder Jesus said to those women, "Don't weep for me, weep for yourselves and your children." 40,000 people starved to death, 1 million perished in the battle, and 97,000 were taken captives. It was a horrible event. Titus trying to preserve the magnificent temple, said to his soldiers, "Don't touch the sacred places." A greedy soldier threw in a torch. The whole place quickly caught alight, and before long, gold was running in rivulets down the walls. Stones were literally pried apart to get the gold in the pavement. Not long ago, archaeologists were excavating. They looked at their hands, at their arms, at their legs, and suddenly they saw something strange. They were covered with soot. They then realized they were actually digging in the 70 AD layer, experiencing the destruction of Jerusalem. It does something to you to stand on the site of these amazing predictions. There is absolutely no doubt about the incredible accuracy of the Hebrew prophets. And it is such a pity that few people have ever looked at these astounding predictions. Archaeologists have discovered the site of this mighty building. And sure enough, the stones have gone. The wall surrounding the temple remains, but the temple itself has disappeared. Julian the Apostate, a Roman emperor who hated Christians, tried to build the temple once again, but was unsuccessful, and the temple was never rebuilt. The Romans in triumph took their captives and trophies, marched them through the streets of Rome. Titus recorded his victories on the triumphal arch. You can see how the menorah, the seven-branched candlestick from the temple, was brought with the captives, clear confirmation of the prediction of Jesus. But how does this affect us today? Very clearly.
You see, Jesus indicated that the fall of Jerusalem was a little sketch of what would happen to the whole planet on a far wider scale. A tiny caricature of what the world would finally experience. And if we were there on that mountain, we would push in beside Jesus and ask him to tell us the future. This is one question that everyone wants answered. What is my future? What is the future of my nation? And what is the future of our world? What happened after the change in communist Russia? Did you know that nuclear radioactive products were being sold on the black market? People from the nuclear plants were suddenly out of work. They would steal the materials for nuclear weapons and sell them on the streets for $1 million. Who knows what criminals have nuclear capability today? What happened after the communism collapse in Russia is anybody's guess. Today we must look for solutions. We need hope in our hearts more than ever, because we live in a very dangerous world.
Did you know deadly poisons are being pumped into our oceans? Nations are simply powerless to know how to dispose of deadly waste. Wealthy countries pay poor countries to take their noxious waste. This is wrong. Poor countries cooperate because they are too poor to do anything about it. Thoughtless politicians are creating a nightmare for the next generations. Some believe that their little corner of the world is immune to all this. Think again. It is as if we are all in a great ship, and suddenly we discover there is a hole in the bow of the ship. We say, but it doesn't affect us right up the back here. I'm quite all right. I can assure you it won't be long before the hole in the bow of the ship affects you away back at the stern. And so it is with the planet. When we look around, we see little cause for alarm. But when we understand that a few criminals could destroy whole cities, like hijackers on a plane, we have a problem. But should we despair?
Let's see how accurate these predictions are for the world today. Our world is changing very rapidly. We lose 100 species of life every single day, a problem that we have never faced before. Do you realise where most of the oxygen that we breathe is manufactured? Our oxygen comes largely from the life that is in the ocean. The oil tanker the Sea Empress lost 475,000 barrels of crude oil in one go. Imagine what that was like for the ocean. That is being repeated again and again. The oceans are being raped.
What about our forests? They are disappearing at the rate of one football field every single second. Think about this. The New York Times will be produced next Sunday and will need raw materials. 150 acres of timber is required just to produce one edition of one newspaper. But that is not our greatest problem. Take a look at the recent development of our population. In 1700, the population was about 600 million. By 1800, it was 1 billion. By 1900, there were 1.7 billion mouths to feed. By 1960, there were 3 billion. By 1975, there were 3.9 billion. From 1960 onwards, there has been a dramatic change. By the end of my lifetime, we are facing something like 9 billion people, and it has happened in a few short years. So we have a world full of poverty, with the wealthy just eating up everything. Jesus said, "As lawlessness spreads, men's love for one another will grow cold." 90% of the world's wealth is in the hands of just a few. It was said that if Bill Gates' money was stacked together in $1 notes, it would reach 1,500 kilometers into the sky. How high do you think your stack would go? Jesus stated very clearly, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. What about famines? While all this is taking place, millions are perishing with nothing to eat. While others have so much to eat, they can think about nothing else but diet pills and weight loss. Approximately 57 million people die each year, 156,000 every day, because they do not have enough to eat. It is almost inconceivable to think of such poverty.
Earthquakes? Yes, Jesus spoke of earthquakes. We have never had so many natural disasters as we now experience around the world. An earthquake is one of the most frightening things to experience. You have nowhere to run. In Spatak, a city of 30,000 people died. They lost more than 90% of the population in a few seconds, and on it goes. Jesus said the sea and the waves would destroy. Tsunamis, we sure know about the sea and the waves roaring, that's for sure. And Jesus said that natural disasters would increase and not diminish. Pestilences, AIDS, bird flu, mad cow disease, cancer, we can't stop them. One is replaced by another, and millions will die.
And wars? We have more wars today than in the whole of human history. We only need to turn on the television and the news virtually revolves around war and terror. If we look back less than a century ago, World War I saw 20 million people lose their lives. Just before I was born, we could kill each other one at a time and make tiny dents in the dirt. Now we have the means to blow up the whole world many times over. In World War II, 50 million people were obliterated. And then the atomic bomb changed everything. I have talked to people in today's war zones who have lost everything. I have unknowingly walked through minefields. I have seen the anguish and heartache that these people have experienced. I've lain in bed and heard bombs and realized that someone is dead. Someone's child has died. Someone will never breathe again. Can't we ever find a solution to the problem of war? No. You go into the cities around the world where war has struck and it seems there's no solution. In one city where I worked, I recall a woman and her lover in an embrace when shrapnel seared into the man's back. The poor woman was suddenly holding a deceased person. I knew Jesus clearly predicted the end would come. He said, just as the world was in Noah's day, that's how it will be immediately before I come back. In those days, all that people thought about was eating, drinking, getting married, and living it up. They did this right up to the very day that Noah and his family went into the ark. Jesus warned that the world would only have a limited time. Peter reminds us, when he comes, the sky will roll back with a roar and everything on earth will be set ablaze. Even the elements composing the world will melt under this intense heat. The earth itself will be on fire and everything that man has made will burn up.
But what then? Is that the future? No, it's not the future for those who know what Jesus said. When he predicted the fall of Jerusalem, he knew it was an example of a far greater story. Jesus said, "My coming will be as noticeable as the lightning which flashes across the sky from east to west. There is coming a time when I will come again," he said. One prophet saw that the Lord will come as unexpectedly as a thief in the night. The earth will be destroyed. Jesus described his coming in an amazing way. He said the graves of the dead will open up, and those who have died trusting in him will never die again. He will be their God, and he will take them home in glory. While the world is facing impossible odds, what a tragedy it would be with all of the knowledge that we have from the past if we didn't understand that he has us in his hands and he knows that he has a better future for us. Every day we can have hope. We can be sure that we have every confidence and joy in every moment.
I remember I had been overseas for some time and our little daughter Heidi had been so worried about her daddy. What had happened to him? I had been in some pretty touchy spots in the world and finally got into London, and I was able to call from there. You know, I never realised how it affects little children when they don't know if you are safe. After the call, I was later told that Heidi went around in circles for an hour just singing, "I'm happy, oh, I'm happy, I'm happy." What simple love. Well, that's how it is when we know the future is secure.
But are you secure? We have briefly touched on some of the Bible prophecies of Jesus today, but keep watching the rest of the series and we'll unravel more of the future with you. The prophecies of Daniel and Revelation are also of major significance for the time that we are living in, and we will cover these specifically for you later in the series.
I promised to tell you what Daniel predicted. What did he say about our future? God gave Daniel a vision of the future, and it is absolutely certain. He said 4 great powers would rule the earth: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and then Rome. And then Rome would divide. Then in his dream, Daniel saw a stone cut out of the mountain, and it descended on the earth and totally destroyed it. But what did the stone represent? Daniel saw the coming of Jesus. He said, "In the days of these kings," that is, in the world we know today, the God of heaven will set up his kingdom. It will destroy all the kingdoms of the world. But God's kingdom will never be conquered or destroyed. It will stand forever.
Because Daniel was so accurate, we must not fail to understand the warnings that God has given. Jesus certainly proved that to be the case for Jerusalem. Are we going to listen to what he has warned about our planet? The story of Pompeii has taught us that it's foolish to ignore the warnings. In the next session, I want to share with you the greatest escape plan ever devised. It will literally save your life. It's not a hope, it's a certainty. So see you next time, when you'll find out how you can have a peace in your life so deep you could never have thought it possible.